Hello, I'm Seafood Source Editor Sean Murphy, and welcome to another edition of Seafood Source TV, the bi-weekly video blog where we bring you news, information, and insights into the world of the seafood industry. The Gulf Coast region of the United States has a large and diverse seafood industry, extending from Texas to New Orleans to Florida, and covering everything from shrimp to crawfish to catfish. The region has had its share of hardships, natural disasters including hurricanes such as the infamous Hurricane Katrina, and man-made disasters such as the equally infamous Deepwater Horizon BP oil spill have taken their toll on the industry and the sea life that supports it. All this as the local industry lobbies federal regulators and Congress for help in keeping a level playing field against fierce competition from foreign exporters. It's a tough challenge for any collection of seafood industries, which are known for being fragmented and not well known for speaking with a single voice. But now a new organization is hoping to change that in the Gulf Coast area. The Gulf Seafood Institute, produced by Gulf seafood distributors, restaurant associations, and other organizations, is designed to speak for the seafood industries of the 5 states, Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, Florida, and Texas, that make up the Gulf Coast community. In a model that is reminiscent of the Louisiana Seafood Marketing Board and the Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute, the Gulf Seafood Institute will perform a variety of support functions, including advocating in Washington, promoting research, and seeking funding for disaster relief. Joining us today via Skype from Bon Secour, Alabama to talk about the new initiative and the future of the seafood industry on the Gulf Coast is Chris Nelson, one of the Institute's board members. Chris, thanks for joining us today on Seafood Source TV.
It's good to be here, Sean. Thank you.
Well, let's talk for a minute about how this started. What was the inspiration for putting this initiative together in the first place?
Well, I think certainly one of the inspirations grew out of the most recent man-made disaster that we've had here, which was the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. It continued to highlight what has become abundantly clear to us in recent history, the need for unifying our voice and having a presence at the federal level as well as the state level. I was involved in a group, still am involved in a group, the Gulf Oyster Industry Council, GOIC, which my 2 friends, Mike Voisin and Al Sunseri. Mike recently passed away in February, and Al Sunseri and I still are active in that, along with a number of other oyster industry members. And what we realized in the almost 20-year history of that group is how powerful we can be if we will all just get on the same page in 5 Gulf states. And so we have members in Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas that all are able to go to Washington, D.C. We go up there at least once a year and walk around Capitol Hill and talk about the issues that are affecting the oyster industry. So I think the same model is we want to carry forward, uniting all the different seafood industry groups in the Gulf to see if we can find some common issues that we can talk to our elected representatives in Washington, D.C. about how they can help us recover from disasters, be more profitable, be a more resilient industry in general, and be a stronger community in the Gulf for seafood production and getting good, fine seafood products in the markets and on people's plates in restaurants.
You mentioned Mike Voisin earlier, and of course we talked about him at length on SeafoodSource.com. His passing was definitely a tough moment for the Louisiana seafood community. His contributions there were obvious. Talking about Louisiana for a second, just backing up to Hurricane Katrina, which even from a mainstream perspective, forget about the seafood industry for a minute, but just from the mainstream perspective, there were a lot of people throughout the Gulf Coast region saying, hey, don't forget about us. You know, everybody was talking about relief for New Orleans and relief for Louisiana. Of course they deserved it and they needed it. But there were people in Mississippi, there were people in Alabama saying, hey, don't forget us. We're having trouble with this too. It strikes me as that was part of the problem too, is that there's a bit of a fragmentation going on there, that people, when they think of the Gulf seafood industry, the first thought is Louisiana. And, you know, nothing wrong with that, but it sounds like the Gulf Seafood Institute's purpose is also to make sure that people remember all of the states and all of the industries. Did you find that was a problem coming into this that you wanted to solve?
Yes, and I think what people forget is that, and particularly when something affects a particularly important state like Louisiana, thinking back to Katrina, and again, my experience with oysters, Louisiana is the most important oyster producing region really in the world. And it's so highly productive. It's also very important, obviously, for shrimp and crabs and finfish. But for oysters, it's there's hardly any place in second place. And what happened is people certainly focused on the impacts of the hurricane on the infrastructure and on the fishery and on in Louisiana and Mississippi as well, but primarily in Louisiana and New Orleans. And it affected the entire Gulf Coast. It really affected the entire United States when it came to the seafood industry, because it affected the ability of that very important area to produce the seafood products that we all live and die on. And it's like constricting a hose. Everything downstream of that constriction starves for water. We all starved for oysters and shrimp and crabs and all the other seafood items that would be produced out of that area whenever there is a natural or man-made disaster like Katrina or the oil spill.
Well, you mentioned a recovery from disasters, and BP you mentioned too. What do you see as the real challenge, the major challenge that faces the Gulf seafood industry going forward? Is it BP, and if it is BP, are there any other challenges beyond that come to mind immediately for you guys?
Well, I think our major challenge going forward, at least in the near term, is going to be production, getting enough production back up and running. The effects of the spill, I think, are long since past. What we've got to do now is get all of our production-oriented part of the community back up and running at full steam, whether that be oysters, crabs, finfish, shrimp. Make sure we have fisheries management that is amenable to having as much fishing power, as much effort as we possibly can put to bear, because we have a lot of products that we need to get back in the marketplace with. That incident that occurred 3 years ago, the brief period that we were off the market, we've really never been able to fully recover our position in the marketplace because it's been so difficult to produce the seafood and get it to market since then.
Last question, talking about the markets, we have to mention the competition from foreign markets. It's always been there. It's still there. It's probably always going to be there. How hard is that going forward for you guys? I mean, there's been talk for a while. A couple of the seafood organizations down there have been lobbying regulators to try to change the rules a little bit, to kind of make things a little fairer, a little more even-handed. Some say it's necessary. Some say it won't really matter at all. What's your thoughts on that going forward?
Well, my thoughts, as they have been for a number of years, are that imports are a fact of life. I think it's it's good that we're able to import seafood. Otherwise, the United States would have 90% less seafood available to consume, and I think that has to get people need to be reminded of how much of the seafood that we consume domestically comes from overseas. And if we didn't have that source, whether that be Canada or Southeast Asia or Australia or India or wherever, if we didn't have those sources of seafood, we really would suffer from a lack of the availability. So we have to have those sources. However, you have to also watch and make sure that the production of those products is being done in a safe and environmentally responsible manner. I think that's important. And also that the pricing is fair. A lot of people roll their eyes about shrimp and looking at anti-dumping or countervailing duties. Well, those things are important. I mean, they've been seen to be important in other industries. They're no less important in shrimp or finfish, crawfish. The catfish industry has suffered from it. Granted, we're not, it sounds like protectionism, but we're just simply, as you put it earlier, looking for a level playing field. If you've got particularly a non-market economy that's producing something like shrimp and prices are set in a somewhat arbitrary fashion, it's very easy for those products to be produced and priced in a way that is not a level playing field with U.S. products. And so all we're looking for, again, is the ability to compete in the marketplace evenly with the imported product. But again, it's not to exclude the imported products because they are vitally necessary to supply the restaurants and retail markets that are out there that supply the consumers in the United States.
Okay. Well, it's going to be interesting to see what the Institute does in the future and how it's going to be benefiting the Gulf seafood industry. I'm sure the seafood industry in the U.S. is going to be watching all around. So, Chris Nelson, thanks for being with us today to talk about this a little bit.
Thank you, Sean.
Chris Nelson's a member of the board of directors of the Gulf Seafood Institute, which is a new organization designed to speak with a unified voice for the Gulf seafood industry. And we'll be watching from SeafoodSource.com to see what happens in the Gulf seafood industry and in the seafood industry in general. And make sure to keep check back here in 2 weeks for another edition of Seafood Source TV, where we bring you more news, information, and insights from the world of the seafood industry. Till then, I'm Seafood Source editor Sean Murphy saying thanks for watching, and we'll see you online.